With another episode of Relational Leadership. Super excited today. My name is Stephanie Clements.
And my name is Shawn Dawley. And Stephanie, today we are going to be talking about personality tests. For those who have maybe taken them before, you may have taken something called the Myers-Briggs or the Big Five, but essentially any personality test is what is called psychometric battery. There's a good Scrabble word for you.
Yeah,
It's
right.
a psychometric battery whereby through a lot of statistical and scientific approaches, teams of typically psychologists have developed a litany of questions, maybe 90, 100, 150, such that by how you answer them, let's say that it's a statement, and then do you agree with that statement completely or not at all, anything in between? It basically goes and mines through this big treasure trove of other respondents, and it will tell you with pretty good accuracy where you fall across a range of different personality types. So today, you and I, we both took one called the Enneagram, another Scrabble word, and we're going to share our results. But for the listeners, you may hear yourself in me or Stephanie. Know that we're going to cover a few other different personality types and what it means to be a leader when you're managing different personalities.
Right. So this has like stirred up all kinds of talk here just in my office today as we've discussed personality types. And it is almost scary at how accurate it describes you. And we took ours, and they didn't pay us to do this. We took ours at truity.com. I ended up, when I was done, and I did go ahead and pay, but it is a 19-page report that really, really talks about in depth, from how I deal with relationships, how I deal with leadership, how I deal with conflict. It goes very in depth. So I will start off, and my personality type is an Enneagram 2, which is the giver. Tends to be nurturing, approachable, empathetic, genuine, gentle, and altruistic. So tell us about yours.
I was declared to be the perfectionist.
I'd have never
And you
guessed.
can imagine the attributes associated with that. I'll quickly go down the list of 3 through 9 so people listening can maybe start to feel where they might be. Number 3 is the achiever. Number 4 is the individualist. Number 5 is the investigator. Number 6 is the skeptic. Number 7 is the enthusiast. Number 8 is the challenger. And number 9 is the peacemaker. I will tell you, when it told me I was a perfectionist and I began to read through what that meant, well, naturally, there's a list of wonderfully positive attributes.
Absolutely.
The hard part is the second half of the report.
Yeah.
That points out your blind spots, your negative proclivities. And what I had to keep reminding myself was that disposition is not destiny.
Correct.
My personality is relatively static. I'm the same quote unquote perfectionist I was at 25, but 24 years later, I've maybe grown, matured. And so I still have the same baseline inclinations. I've just learned to maybe keep some of the negative aspects in check.
Sure. And that is one of the things that this report does is it talks about where your strengths are and what are areas that you can grow in. And because it's not just a straight up, when you take this, I'm not just a straight up 2. I have other areas that are still strong, and other areas again that are weak that it keys in on. So it's really kind of it's fun to look at. I mean, 2 tends to get along with almost everybody, but it's also being the people pleaser, which can get you overwhelmed. And for anybody that knows me, that is very me. That I tend to end up taking on too much, which is another thing that we talked about last week with boundaries, and not setting all of those boundaries, but taking on too much, and then you can get overwhelmed and bogged down.
Yeah. For
and
sure.
then feeling bad because you may disappoint somebody.
Yeah. So as you were going through your list, you led with all the wonderful
Right, of
complimentary attributes.
course.
When she told me she was a 2, I quickly, Googled, what a 2 meant, in this capacity. And then it said, sure enough, when you are healthy and you are living your quote unquote hashtag best life,
Right.
those are the attributes that come to the front. And then it said, when you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed, the nastier side of that characteristic comes out, and it says you could be prone to perhaps being a martyr, perhaps guilt tripping either yourself, like I'm not doing enough. Now we'll get to my later,
yeah.
right? But I'll ask, do you feel like you've always been that way, or do you think it began to develop at a certain point in life?
I think in general, I probably was always that way. I don't really remember a time that I wasn't. So, and one of the things, as I've dug into the Enneagram is that your personality type and what you're kind of prone to doesn't change.
That's right.
So, I probably always have been a 2. Now I'm almost as strongly a 3 as I am a 2. So, that's where it breaks it down more with that being an achiever and, sometimes overachiever and whatever, just trying to get, so, but I do think that was the strongest, but I haven't always been the healthy 2.
Yeah.
And so, so you tend to do it for sometimes the wrong reasons, which you're just trying to gain love and acceptance and respect and whatever, and you're just willing to do almost everything just to get those things.
Sure.
And the disappointment that you feel if it's not recognized.
Okay.
And so, I do think, thankfully, I'm a much healthier 2 now.
Yeah.
And do it a lot more because I enjoy helping people, but I have more altruistic motives in it.
Sure. So though they listed 1 through 9, don't think of it as a list. Think of it as a 9 sliced pie, such that 2 is adjacent to both 1 and 3.
Yeah.
Imagine going around the wheel. And so as a 2, I looked up, and so the 3 is the achiever, which seeks admiration, and a big fear is being obscure or kind of relegated to the sidelines where you don't really feel you've got
needed.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't feel that purpose. So interestingly enough, I am adjacent to you. So as a 1 on that 9 spoke wheel, I'm adjacent to 2. So as a perfectionist, I seek accomplishment. Like I want to be able to look back at my day and say, okay, I had 8 things on my list. I crossed all 8 things off. Or more strategically, I set out to achieve this long-term goal, and come heck or high water, I'm going to achieve it. The flip side of that is this overarching fear of failure.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid I don't meet my goal. Heaven forbid I don't meet my objective. And I like what you just said earlier, the motive, right?
Yeah.
So what tends to determine the healthy or unhealthy manifestation of any given personality trait is what is motivating it. If you, as a giver, are motivated for those altruistic, reasons, that's going to probably be a healthy application of the attribute. If it's no, I've got to go above and beyond and work 20 hours a day because I'm desperately seeking the approval of others, well, then that's where we get into a bit of a problem. And I know I can relate to that as a perfectionist, as they call me.
So I did look up some areas of growth on your side, and not saying that you're not any of the, but being the perfectionist, you hold yourself to such a high standard, and then you can also hold the people under you to that same high standard. And it can be hard sometimes to work for somebody who is going to hold you to such a high standard that they feel like they can't meet.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
So, so one of the things it was talking about for 1, is first being kind to yourself. and allowing and forgiving yourself for what you perceive as missing the mark.
Mm-hmm.
2, being patient with others because they're not all in the same place
Yeah.
that you are. And again, as business owners, as leaders, we can expect everybody to fall in line and do everything exactly the way we would.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ways to do it. And then being open to other people's perspective,
Yes.
and then have fun, because on my side, I'm fun. You're the one that, you got to lighten up and have fun.
No.
You know,
Leisure is for losers.
Right.
You have fun on your own time. No, so as you're going down that list, as I mentioned earlier, and I think this is such an important point that we need to keep reinforcing it. Your personality is not something for which you apologize. Like none of these personalities are inherently bad.
No,
It's being cognizant that it can at times point you in directions that are counterproductive. So I'm the same perfectionist I was 20 years ago.
right.
The difference is that now I am aware of myself, and B, I am more empathetic to others because my first couple of leadership jobs as a perfectionist, I employed this style you might call pace setting, where it's all right, I'm going full throttle. You all try to keep up. If you can't keep up, work harder, run faster.
Right.
With certain teams and certain competitions and certain contests and contexts, that works.
Sure.
But it doesn't work all the time for everybody. And so as you're going down that list, I'm like, yeah, those are skills that I grudgingly began to grow and develop, over a pretty lengthy period of time. But yeah, to this day, if I'm sitting in traffic and I see somebody just cruising up the shoulder of the emergency lane, and they're basically cutting line, the perfectionist in me is like, no, society needs rules, order.
Yes.
That is not right. The difference is that now I don't have a stroke over it, whereas 20 years ago, my blood pressure would have shot through the roof. This isn't fair, so.
Yeah, and we see those people. We see both sides. We see the people who are going to immediately pull over and block you because no, you're not allowed to do those things, and I'm going to be the enforcer of it.
Yeah.
And then, and I always say, I'm overall a rule follower as long as it makes sense. And then I sometimes am a rule bender, it doesn't make sense. And if we did it like this, it's still not hurting anything and it accomplishes what we need to accomplish. And so I'm not really just throw the rules out and whatever, but it's a guideline.
Yeah,
right?
no, I can be a tad situational, right? So I'm in large measure, I do believe that when everybody follows a set of standards, it does provide some order that tends to collectively benefit society, right? Now, that being said, when the Chinese, buffet says kids 10 and under are $7.99, 11 and older pay the adult price. Well, my daughter was 10 years old for 4 years because, so
she's little enough that you were
like, I will admit that at times I would bend or break the rules when it absolutely benefited me.
Sure.
So I'm not a saint or a martyr when it comes to that, but my disposition is always inclined towards follow the rule.
Well, and I think that's what makes society work in general is that if everybody were rule followers, we wouldn't find out better ways.
Yeah.
It takes the one who's going to go, no, I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden you go, oh, that actually might have worked better.
Right. Yeah.
And so, if we, but you can't have everybody running off doing their own thing and there's no order. So you need, so it really does take all of the types to keep society going and running.
And that's that's a strong segue into how, as a leader, if you have any number of personality dispositions, do you most effectively manage, that broad spectrum? Stephanie, like you said earlier, it's not like you are a 2 and only a 2. There are other personality traits you have that are stronger or weaker than others. But the idea that everybody that works for you has this identical personality is not realistic. Now, I think it's plausible that certain professions may tend to attract
The
people.
same types.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Broadly speaking, a room full of astronautical engineers may tend to overlap in a lot of areas that a room full of fashion designers might not.
Right.
But then they might have their own, overlaps.
Types. Yeah, sure.
So what are, some things that, you think about when you contemplate managing people that have personalities that are not only not yours, but maybe in some ways 180 out,
Yeah.
from how you view the world?
Well, I think it takes, I mean, I know in places that I've worked and whatever, you do personality tests for not only yourself and your employees, because it does sometimes help you know how to more effectively communicate. Because sometimes that's good to help understand who you're dealing with.
Right.
I had, you know, a child who needed very firm, clear, concise, you're not going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this and do this. And that was how we did, others needed it through, if you did this, that would be, it would make me so happy and this and that, and even though there really wasn't this choice, it was the way you had to word it with that child or the way, and so when you can go and understand those personality types within your own organization, it can help you deal and know how to approach those people because everybody is different. If I had one child, if I said, don't do that, you knew that was exactly where he was going.
Yeah.
I noticed I said he, but
sometimes we inadvertently out close acquaintances on the show here. So I will confess that the first couple of times I was in a position where I was hiring people, I was looking, like implicitly, I was looking for people like me. Now, that doesn't mean I was looking for people that check the same outward demographic categories. I found myself looking for people that had a similar, ethos, approach, worldview, what have you. And so it finally dawned on me that as I began to be put into higher positions of leadership and I was building bigger teams, that it was really important that to me, the diversity that was really critical was a diversity of intellect, a diversity of opinion, a diversity of viewpoint. If it just so happened to marry up with other types of diversity, so be it. But I had to deliberately start to surround myself with, if I use this list, like I had to surround myself with, type 6, the skeptic. I had to surround myself with type 5, the investigator, because if I surround myself and I build a team, especially a senior team that has a diverse collection of personalities, when a problem lands on the table, even if I'm at the head of the table and I may have final decision-making authority, I benefit not from having 6 other perfectionists around the table like me. I've already got that view, but having this diverse collection of people.
Well, and the best leadership, I mean, I am not going to be good at everything. And I don't have to be if I surround myself with people who have strengths that I don't have. So that's a really important, fact, as you were saying, having some of those other people because, you need, I don't enjoy doing the books on my, it's just not my thing. I want to know where we are, but I don't want to have to sit down and do them. But there are people who enjoy doing that.
Yeah, that's
and, I need those people on my team. And then I need, and we can't all be leaders. Somebody has to follow, or we don't, if you've got all chiefs and no Indians or, all cooks in the kitchen, it gets difficult to actually get things done.
That's right.
So, you definitely need all personality types in that process. Because I've had people say, oh, I could never do that. I just want a 9-to-5 job. I could never take that risk. And I'm like, and that's okay because we actually need people to work for us along the way also.
Yeah. And, just like I perhaps was implicitly looking for people that had a similar approach to problems, which I began to finally break that habit. And I began to deliberately go after people and bring people onto a team that I knew would have a different outlook. When it came to developing folks, if I had somebody that I felt like had, let's call it upper management potential written all over them, I was pretty deliberate in placing them in their next jobs, such that it would stretch them and it would get them outside of things that were natural or maybe things that they really enjoyed to do. You don't want to break their back and make them like want to
Right,
leave.
right.
But if people have a given personality, and you think that one day they may be running an organization and leading a bunch of different personalities, I think there's some value in purposefully exposing them to different types of growth
Oh,
opportunities that
sure.
force them to develop skills inconsistent with their natural inclinations.
Well, and for me, for my type, and again, it's the giver, but it's also very, very strong as the achiever. I need to know that there's growth potential in the positions that I'm in. I'm not good knowing that you've reached the top, you've capped out, you've reached the top. There's no further place for you to grow to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yes, you want to know those type, because if you've got somebody who is an achiever, you will lose them if you don't challenge them and give them other things to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So those are good things to know. Whereas you may have another one that is best as, they love doing data entry. They don't want to talk to people. They don't want to deal with problems. They just want their one spot. And so
Mm-hmm.
it does allow you to know where you need to give
Mm-hmm.
growth opportunities, and start having them learn and figure out what they're going to be best at.
Yeah. And, when I was going through that list, one that stuck out to me was the individualist, because while people may look at the military and then a subset like Air Force Flying Squadron, there's a temptation to believe, well, that is just such a conformist organization. Everybody are a bunch of robots that came off the same assembly line. And that's just not true, right?
Right.
But in most organizations, there is some degree of conformity required, right? That to some degree.
Sure. Because there are rules, and,
Yeah. And so, like, when I looked at the one that said individualist, and I looked at, hey, on the upside, these are going to be the people that really embrace creativity and bring some of those new solutions to the table.
right.
It tells us that they sometimes, despite how quirky they may seem, actually do fear perpetual alienation. And so I got to be thinking, when I look back and think about organizations where there was one or two people that really did kind of seem just qualitatively different,
Right.
did I really go out of my way to make sure that they knew that I appreciated how unique they were? I certainly wasn't trying to like make them a round peg fit into a square hole, but I wonder, did I always make sure they knew that I appreciated just how unique they were?
Yeah.
Maybe I did, but maybe I didn't.
And that can be on a case by case basis also, because sometimes our personalities clash, and we really struggle that the differences that they bring just don't make sense to us. And sometimes, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to figure out what they're doing,
Sure.
but sometimes that will create that tension if you're not in the right place and you're not really paying attention, to the point that you shut that down instead of hearing and finding
Yeah.
out what they really have to offer.
Yeah. There's a misconception sometimes that the only way that you really validate somebody's contribution is to accept it hook, line, and sinker, and then that's not the case. In a professional and working environment, when there is a problem with no clear-cut solution, if you have created as a leader the culture of collaboration, you may get 5 different ideas, but you're only going to implement one of them.
Right.
So you need not always be completely accepting of anybody's proposition, but when you hear them out, can you at least challenge yourself to make sure that they truly feel like you gave them the audience and the respect they deserved? And if they didn't have their idea come to fruition on this go around, if they believe that you did actually give them the opportunity, well, they're more likely to be an active participant next go around. And that might be the time where they've got the $1 billion idea that saves the day.
Absolutely. And it's so important for members of your team to feel valued, because if they do, they'll go above and beyond. And they'll look and they can take some ownership in it and feel like, because one of the struggles I know that I've had as a business owner is, and it's true in the sense that not everybody loves your business. I mean, that's your baby. Not everybody loves your business the way you do, right? And so I have wanted to clone myself. I just need 5 more of me that really care and are really passionate and really, and that's hard to find. But if you create an environment that they feel that ownership and contribution and that they are being heard, you can create those. And not, it's not your exact clone because it's different personalities, but you can create the passion for it in there.
That's right. I think those are wise words, because if let's say you have 100 people under you, but only, let's say perfectly, 9 direct reports, and each one of them is a different personality type in this spectrum we're talking about today. Well, it's not incumbent upon you as a leader to craft a unique leadership style and approach for every single one of them, right?
Correct.
You can relate to them maybe in a way that is more conducive to their personality, but there are certain things which really are universal. Respect, empathy, compassion. I mean, the low-hanging fruit, sometimes it's really the easiest leadership things that we overlook because we get so gosh darn busy keeping all of the trains running on time. But whether somebody is the achiever or the skeptic, they can appreciate working in a place and for a leader who conveys that they are valued.
Correct. Yeah. And I say we do have a comment about, and we've talked about this in the past about, that you're willing to do and put in just as much of the grind as your employees and as those are under you. If they want to see that you are just as invested in that process. And so companies who put leaders in that really don't care about the organization that totally changes the whole team underneath them, because they will follow and they're going to be passionate about people who really care and, again, put in the same grind that they have, that you expect of them.
Yeah. So another, cautionary tale is for those who may be interested in doing their own personality test, or maybe getting their spouse to do one or their coworkers to do one. When I was a commander years ago, there was a personality profile called 4 lenses.
Okay.
And it puts you into 4 colors, like whatever, red, orange, yellow, blue. And each one had their own set of attributes. And again, I will say the one that whatever bucket I was in seemed pretty accurate. And as I looked around the room, the buckets into which other people who I knew pretty well, were placed seemed to pretty accurate. And the lady who was doing it, who was facilitating the thing, she warned us on the front end, like, these are not meant to be weaponized, whereby 6 months from now you say, that's because you're an orange. That's the way. But it is tempting. It is tempting.
Oh yeah.
Once you kind of give somebody a label, oh, well, you're the perfectionist. That's why. So I am in the interest of protecting you from a lot of heartache. If you convince somebody close to you to take one of these, you cannot hang this over their head and then try to pigeonhole them every time they do something that you don't like. You cannot throw this back in their face.
Right.
Believe me, trust me, do not do that.
Well, we've had a couple of people, as we've been talking about it here in our office, who have taken them. And one of them's like, I don't know that I like this. It's pointing out all the bad things, and I mean, and especially if you focus so much on what your bad traits are, then,
Yeah.
you do need to be careful about how you view it, because it is going to tell you the good,
Mm-hmm.
but this really does help you get to know yourself.
Right.
Again, I've got 19 pages, and um, it's scary how accurate it
Oh yeah.
describes me.
Sure.
And it does say, yep, I do have to work in that area. And then when it tells me, okay, as a healthy one, as an average one, or as an unhealthy one, and I have to sit there and go, where am I hitting right now?
Right. And again, I think that is worth revisiting, in that nobody need apologize for certain personality dispositions,
No.
because the context is critical. If I am with my 2-year-old granddaughter and she is coloring, and I'm using that word generously,
Sure.
as a perfectionist, well, I can ruin the entire experience if I keep correcting her because you're outside the lines, you're outside the line. So you learn,
Right.
okay, let that one go. But now let me flip it around. If you're about to go into surgery, and let's pretend like I'm your neurosurgeon, and the nurse is in there ahead of me, and you ask him like, well, what is, Dr. Dahl like? Oh, he's such a perfectionist. Well, yeah, I hope
You
so.
want that?
Like, I
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
do.
I want you
If,
right in the lines. Do not go.
yes,
Do not go. Yeah.
yes. If you're the astrophysicist designing the reentry parameter algorithms to get the rocket ship back on Earth, you probably want a perfectionist, right?
Right. Right.
But can you switch out of that gear when the waitress brings out your order and it's off a little bit?
Yeah.
Or are you going to make the entire evening spoiled because
Right.
it wasn't exactly perfect and now you're going to throw a fit? So again,
Yeah.
our personalities incline us towards certain things. As we grow and mature and develop, can we learn to situationally, if not turn it on, turn it off, at least dial it down
Right.
when appropriate?
Right.
And that's the path I'm on.
Right. So just because your personality type is your personality type, you can work on the areas that created into being a healthy personality
Mhm.
type. Focus on, find the things where it shows that you need to grow, and concentrate on that. And then, the things that you're doing well, continue, grow
Sure.
those
Yeah.
areas also, so yes, it doesn't 100% define you, and it just gives you a baseline of where to go. But I do think they are good with using as leaders, and not only for you to understand people below you, beside you, that sort of thing, but also your team, in really learning about themselves. They may go, yeah, I do see myself doing that. Maybe I could do a little better.
Sure. Sure.
My,
I guess before I turn it over to you for the closeout, my parting advice is, if you do take one of these, like Stephanie said, parts of it can be a tad unpleasant, because you may read something that hits close to home. You may want to pretend like it doesn't, but on some level it registers as accurate. What I would just simply encourage you to keep in mind is that, just like with your physical body, growth only happens during the struggle. It's only when you're running harder, lifting more weights, doing more reps, when you're pushing yourself to the point where you feel like you're really struggling, that's where all the growth happens. I would encourage you, if you do take a personality test, embrace that struggle, embrace the discomfort, because you may be looking at a mirror that's showing an image back to you that you wish weren't true, but embrace that and know that there's growth there. There's growth for all of us, because we're all works in progress.
So, well, we are out of time, and really appreciate, we had, comments, and really appreciate those. And then we have some really interesting topics coming up. So we appreciate all of you for watching and following us. We are on Spotify, we are on Audible, and Apple. So please go follow us there. You can follow us here, and also on YouTube and LinkedIn. Share it if you liked what you heard, and that just helps us to grow and continue to provide good content. So thanks again for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care.